All right. Canelo Alvarez gets shamed by Errol Spence Jr. We're going to talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel, subscribers. If you are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon. Also, check out the live streams we do Monday through Friday after Trail Boxing Talk, and also on Sunday morning, OG Boxing Talk. Hey, Patreons, we got some more stuff coming up this week. So you'll be getting notified that in the mornings when we drop those. Now, we all know that Charlo won/defended the WBC belt that was stripped from Canelo Alvarez. I say stripped, and I will always say stripped, because that is the practical result of what happened when the WBC removed him as the WBC champion and gave him this title called WBC franchise guy. Whatever. Charlo is now the WBC 160-pound champion. Canelo Alvarez still holds the IBF and the WBA titles, along with the WBO title that is held by Demetrius Andrade. Those are the three middleweight title holders. In the press conference after Charlo beat Brandon Adams in a very good fight, I was actually close on the floor for that fight. Shout out to everybody in the LDBC that came up and introduced themselves, man. It was really a pleasure to meet all of you. Look forward to seeing you guys at the next fight we go to. Errol Spence, after that fight, got on a microphone as an interviewer, as a member of the media, and asked Charlo what he had to do to get Canelo Alvarez to fight him. And said, look, what you gonna do to get Gennady Golovkin or Canelo Alvarez to fight you? They dropping belts and getting handed these different funny kind of belts just to avoid fighting you. What you gonna have to do, Jamal? What are you gonna have to do? Jamal answered the question, said, man, I don't know. I'm gonna keep fighting. Eventually, they're gonna have to fight me. Eventually, it's gonna have to happen. Okay? Now, why do I say that Errol Spence Jr. shamed him? Because Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya, through his promoter, Oscar De La Hoya, is trying to get a fight with Errol Spence Jr. or offered a fight with Errol Spence Jr., who's a 147-pounder, but would drop a belt or allowed himself to be stripped of a title to avoid fighting a guy at his same weight class. That is why I say he shamed him. I'm a Canelo Alvarez fan, and I'm going to talk to you guys that listen to this video, or to my fellow Canelo Alvarez fans. You can't shine this turd, man. You can't shine it. You can't shine it. Every time you shine it, all you're going to do is get crap on your cloth. It doesn't work, okay? There's no excuse for this. There's no excuse for that. There is no excuse for that for the clenbuterol. There's just no excuse. This is the second weight class that Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya have done this to Charlo. And I don't want to hear any of the arguments. There aren't any good arguments about why he shouldn't face him. The Gennady Golovkin fight is over with. Gennady Golovkin held belts. Those fights were over with. If Canelo Alvarez was going to legitimately be a 160-pound title, there's only two people that he should fight, and only three scenarios or two fighters, and then maybe one or two potential other fighters that he should fight at all at 160. The two fighters are Charlo, who is his mandatory, Demetrius Andrade, who's the 160-pound champion, or the mandatory that might get ordered by either the IBF or the mandatory that could be ordered by the WBA. But to drop a belt in order to get out of fighting your mandatory, in Jamal Charlo, it's just shameful. And I can go through all the arguments that people are going to try to make to support this argument. They don't work. Jamal Charlo isn't known. Isn't that the usual one? He isn't known. Who knows Jamal Charlo? Ask your question. Who knew Daniel Jacobs? Why would Jamal Charlo have be any less of a potential matchup, a legitimate matchup than Daniel Jacobs? They're the same. Matter of fact, Jamal Charlo is probably a little more popular than Daniel Jacobs, and he never lost. He's never been knocked. He didn't get knocked out by Demetrius Pirog. He didn't lose. He didn't get knocked down and lose a controversial or close decision to Gennady Golovkin. He doesn't have 2 losses on his resume. And you have people consistently asking and seeing that fight gets made. What's the problem? Jamal Charlo is more well-known and has a better resume than Rocky Fielding did, and more than Liam Walsh did, and in a better situation than James Kirkland when he fought James Kirkland. I always find it real interesting how people that don't want to see their fighter fight somebody else can say that fighter is a nobody or hasn't done enough, but be perfectly willing to accept that fighter fighting people that the same thing applies to, if not more so the case. This was his mandatory. That's in the rules of the WBC. But instead of fighting his mandatory, he decides that he's going to leave that belt alone, or they're going to have to take that belt from him and go up and fight. Who's he going to fight next? He's going to have a trilogy with Gennady Golovkin, or, which I'm hearing he doesn't want, or Callum Smith. He beat Liam Smith, the guy's brother, already for 168 WBA 168-pound title. If you're going to fight at the 168-pound division, and I said this about Mikey Garcia too, and I'll say this about Canelo Alvarez. If you're going to fight at 168, fight at 168 pounds. If you're going to fight at 175 pounds, fight at 175 pounds. Don't spend 4 and 5 fights, 3 fights jumping between weight classes and not defending against the guys that are in the weight class that you hold the belt in. That's that Mikey Garcia mode of operation, where he wins the lightweight title against Zach Clannon. I'm mispronouncing his name. And then he doesn't fight and defend the 135-pound belt that he held for at least another year, almost another 2 years, when he goes to fight Adrian Bronner. And then he fights Sergey Lipinets. And then he comes back down and unifies against Robert Easter, but then boom, leaves again back to 147. The lightweight division I think the lightweight division right now is better because you have guys that are all fighting at that division and don't seem like they want to go skipping around. And if it's cherry picking, you don't think it's cherry picking, okay, you don't think it's cherry picking, or being just extremely, extremely opportunistic in who they're fighting. If you're going, what Canelo Alvarez is doing, in my opinion, is a smudge on another smudge on his boxing legacy. If people say, oh, what I'm looking for legacy, how is dropping your belt or getting getting de facto stripped of your belt for not fighting your mandatory and not fighting the guy in the second weight class building your legacy? Rocky Fielding means the belts. Oh, it's the belts. Anyway, look, shout out to Errol Spence Jr. for saying that and for doing that. And I'm really hoping, and honestly, man, and I've said this before, I'm really happy with the WBC. I'm happy that the WBC, I can't say that they stood their ground to Canelo, but sometimes, man, you got to come up with creative alternatives to a problem. And that's what it seemed like that was. They invented a designation for Canelo called the franchise champion, which means, and it says that he will, when he retires, become the Emeritus champion, but that's not a belt. It's not a belt that somebody can win off of him. If he fought somebody, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at 160 pounds, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. somehow wins that fight, Chavez does not become the franchise champion. And that's a misnomer that's been out there in the media, where people probably just didn't read the rules and don't understand that that's the case. So I don't really have any issue with, I like what the WBC did. I'm not the biggest fan on how they did it, because I really think that they should have allowed that fight, the belt, to be on the line with Brandon Adams. I mean, it was on the line, but if it was just there and they said that this is going to be for the title, the WBC title, and marketed it that way instead of just naming Jermall Charlo the champion, I think that wouldn't have stole his thunder so much. And it also would have highlighted the fact that they were really fighting for for the WBC championship and not some secondary belt to this franchise label that they created for Canelo. So anyway, man, shout out to Errol Spence Jr. Love that in that interview. Let me know what you think in the comment sections. With that, I'm out. Peace.